Uh,
Okay, cool. We're recording. You can go.
so our project is about utilizing parsing expression grammars within algebraic Julia, and I'm Dylan Zhao.
And I'm Christian Scaff. There we go.
So before we go over our project, we probably should explain what is algebraic Julia. So it's an ecosystem of software within the Julia language consisting of packages dedicated to applying generalized algebra and category theory to different scientific domains. And one major component of algebraic Julia is usage of domain-specific languages, which is what we will be working with. So the thing is, there's a problem with DSLs where they're built using syntactic macros and handwritten parsers, which causes a lack of freedom in use of operators, where, for example, we may want to use a certain symbol as an operator, but since we're using DSLs, we're restricted by the rules of Julia, which may have a specific use for that operator. And another issue is that it's difficult to fix bugs and reuse core components because handwritten parsers require a lot of recursive functions. So our solution is use parser expression grammars. So instead of using these parser functions, we use these one-line expressions where the grammar can recognize these strings in the language and as these parsing expressions that reference each other. And they're easier to reuse, they're easier to modify, and they aren't as restricted by Julia's rules.
Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and look at what exactly our implementations are going to be, right? So Dylan already mentioned that we're going to take some domain-specific languages with an algebraic Julia and convert them to our new method with a parsing expression grammar. But we're going to have an overview what those are going to be. So we want to introduce pegs for the following macros: the decapode macro and program macro. The decapode macro is utilized for representing physical systems. The program macro is utilized to representing directed wiring diagrams, which is important in category theory. The third thing we want to do is we want to create a domain-specific language for an algebraic optimization.jl package, which is an algebraic Julia. And we want to back it once again by parsing expression grammar. And this package is utilized for implementing discipline convex programming. And we want to, right now it's kind of more so implemented through functions. We want to implement it more through an actual formal language and grammar. And on top of that, we want to maintain just a generic CATLAB module for our common rules as we build them so we can reuse these different one-line expressions, as Dylan mentioned. So now let's look at the software architecture design. This is a pretty basic diagram. It's not as complicated as some other things, and it doesn't utilize a lot of different things in it. It's more of just a kind of down to earth, very straightforward project. But we want to take in a string of text. It's going to go through our string macro, which is going to send it over to our parsing expression grammar. Like Dylan said, it's comprised of these rules that are one line expressions. So these are syntactic rules. After you run a rule, it'll kind of generate a tree output or some sort of subtree for that rule that you matched. And that can then be sent to a semantic analysis helper function to decorate the tree or do different maneuvers on it, right? So we would essentially kind of recursively go through that until we have an outputted abstract syntax tree or a parse tree from our parser. And then we're going to take that parse tree and put it into a constructor function that's going to generate a atchit, which is a in-memory database utilized in algebraic Julia. It stands for attributed category set. And it's essentially just some tables or database representation of the scientific model that you generated from your string of text. And that's the end output. A little bit more specific into this, you can see an example from last semester, the relation string macro that was created in CATLAB, which is an algebraic Julia. You can see the string of text being sent through a string macro, which gets sent to this parsing expression grammar, which contains rules with different expressions, which then outputs an abstract syntax tree, which then gets sent to a constructor, and then overall outputs this in-memory database, which represents our scientific model that we can then use to do different things like output diagrams and whatnot. So now let's go ahead and look at our project progress. We have pretty much three main sections, two macros, and then the last package that we want to pretty much create a new macro for. Um, we are right here. The decabodes macro is about almost complete. We're kind of running into some last minute bugs that we need to figure out and fix. But we have a lot of different unit tests and end-to-end tests created. So we're just kind of ironing those out and then hopefully getting on starting with our analysis of the program macro to create that. This is a quick sneak peek. It's not super informative because it's a lot of lines of code, but it gives an idea of how it's looking so far, almost done. And then here's an example of an end-to-end test. So this is a heat transfer model that you can represent through a decapode. And you can see our string macro comparing to the original parser syntactical macro output or input. You can see that we're comparing them. Now, in terms of individual responsibilities or upcoming task is the cat lab program macro, as I mentioned, and I'll hand it over to Dylan to go over what he's going to be working on in the next coming weeks.
So what I'll be working with is a syntactic analysis portion where we'll be working with the lexing and parsing part, or essentially the development of the parsing expression grammar.
Yep, and what I'll be working on is the semantic analysis. So this goes for the parsing expression grammar helper functions I mentioned that decorates the abstract syntax tree or the parse tree as it's created. And then on top of that, it'll be the code generation. So once we have this abstract syntax tree created, it'll go into a constructor function that then generates it into lower level code that creates an hatchet or this in-memory database that can be used for our model. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.